Okay, now let's move on to number 4, public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone here who has a comment on anything that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 5, which is the approval of minutes of the May 27th meeting. And is there anybody who has any questions, comments, corrections? If there's none, I'm asking for an motion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there
Second.
support? We have support. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then we'll move on now to, where did I put my agenda here? There it is. Agenda number 6, the setback and sidewalk variances. Where is that? Medema at 5991 Venture Park Drive. And in this one, Ms. Farmer is within 300 feet of the building, so she's asked to be recused. And since Mr. Williams is not here, we're going to be calling on both of our alternates on this, in this particular case. Go ahead. If you want to start off, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. The applicant is requesting 2 variances for the property located at 5991 Venture Park Drive. The first variance is for a reduced setback from the south property line for an office building addition. And then the second is for a sidewalk variance along the property's frontage adjacent to Venture Park Drive. The Michigan courts have applied 5 principles for a variance. These standards of review are provided on this slide. Over the next few slides, I'll provide a separate summary for each standard for each request. So first, we'll start off with request A, which is where the applicant is requesting a 26-foot reduction of the 85-foot required setback along the south property line in order to construct a 4,129 square foot office building addition. So the first criterion to consider is unique physical circumstances. In other words, are there any unique physical limitations or conditions which would prevent compliance with the zoning ordinance? There is a stormwater basin on the east side of the existing office building. However, it is proposed to get filled in as the office addition is designed to be placed over the existing stormwater basin location. A new basin is proposed further to the southeast, and the proposal of a new accessory building, which may or may not be limiting where the addition can be placed, is not required by ordinance. Site parking can be reduced substantially through the township's forthcoming parking text amendments if the property owner so choose. There are no unique physical circumstances present which prevent the building addition to shift further east. The location and size of the building addition is entirely discretionary and could be placed elsewhere. The second criterion is whether conformance is unnecessarily burdensome. Reasonable use of the property remains if the variance request is denied as commercial uses, such as the existing financial planning office, are allowed on the property and may continue. As mentioned previously, the building could extend further east rather than extending south in order to satisfy setback requirements. Additionally, the proposed accessory building could be attached to the proposed building addition or be completely removed from the project. Removing the accessory building would create additional building area for the proposed expansion. It should also be considered that a financial planning office is a low-intensity commercial use compared to allowable uses within this district, such as a fast food drive-through or even a gas station. And then it should also be noted that the closest residential unit is approximately 181 feet away from the proposed building addition. And then the third criterion to consider is substantial justice. So basically, how did the ZBA rule on similar variance requests in the past? Planning department staff were able to identify 4 similar requests where commercially used properties abutting residential zoning were considered by the ZBA for setback relief. And then a summary of these findings are provided in the report from staff. The next criterion to consider is whether the request is a self-created hardship. The request could be considered a self-created hardship as it is the applicant's desire to place the building addition as currently proposed. There is potentially an opportunity to redesign the building addition to conform with minimum setback requirements as outlined in the zoning ordinance. And then the last criterion to consider is regarding the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The building addition is proposed to be 26 feet closer to the south property line than what is allowed by ordinance currently. That said, the south elevation of the building addition is passive versus an active part of a commercial building such as a loading dock, for instance. Also, on the south side of the subject property, it's completely wooded. And then the ordinance requires a 30-foot wide landscape buffer along the entire south property line. And then, since a residential use is adjacent next door to the south. Such ordinance provisions are intended to provide a buffer and necessary screening between incompatible land uses. Therefore, allowing the variance requested may have no impact to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighboring residential units or the public. Additionally, the building for Metro Toyota is approximately 110 feet away from the residential units located at Quill Run condominiums. And then the subject building addition is proposed to be only located approximately 180 feet from the closest residential unit at the Quill Run condominium site, which is set back 70 feet further compared to the Metro Toyota building. On this slide is a summary of the findings of fact for approval and denial for request A for a setback variance. And then moving on is request B, which they're requesting a variance to not be required to install a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk along the property's road frontage adjacent to Venture Park Drive. So for unique physical circumstances, there does not appear to be any unique physical limitations on site which would prevent the property owner from being able to install sidewalk along the road frontage. There are no steep slopes or grading challenges present, as the land is relatively flat in the area where the sidewalk is planned for. In terms of whether conformance is unnecessarily burdensome, there currently is no sidewalk in the vicinity. It could be argued, and it could be considered unreasonable to require sidewalk to be installed in a location that does not connect to another non-motorized facility in the vicinity or nearby. Given the recent changes in the law, constructing a sidewalk to nowhere does now violate the new PROAG statute. Additionally, the master plan process will be taking a close look at the non-motorized transportation plan and recommendations for revisions that will most likely eliminate the automatic requirement to build a non-motorized facility at time of site plan review. And as for researching past CBA decisions regarding variance relief from the township sidewalk requirements, planning department staff were able to identify 3 similar cases, and those are provided in the report from staff as well. So in terms of a self-created hardship, the applicant's request is what is causing the public hearing and therefore could be considered self-created. Reasonable use of the property remains if the variance is denied, as the financial planning office use can continue as is. Then as far as public safety and welfare, it is not expected that the variance request would negatively impact the health, safety, or welfare of the public. So again, on this slide is a summary of the findings of fact for both approval and denial of a sidewalk variance for this property. And lastly, our possible board motions. So possible board motions include, one, the ZBA denies the variance request from section 50.70 of the zoning ordinance, but approves the variance for section 57.90 with the condition that the applicant consents to a special assessment district for the future 5-foot wide non-motorized facility. The second possible motion is the ZBA denies the variance request from section 57.90, but approves the variance from section 50.70 of the zoning ordinance. Then as a condition of approval, the required 30-foot wide landscape buffer along the south property line remain undisturbed and be left in its current natural state. Number three, the ZBA approves alternate variance relief from section 50.70 requiring a different setback than what is currently proposed by the applicant, but denies the variance request from section 57.90. Four, the ZBA approves both variances with conditions that the applicant consents to the sidewalk SAD agreement, and then that the required 30-foot wide landscape buffer along the south property line remain undisturbed and be left in its current natural state. Then last, number five, the ZBA denies both variance requests from both sections 50.70 and 57.90 of the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there someone here from someone from the applicant that would like to speak out to this, please? And please step up to the podium and state your name and position.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Rosell with AR Engineering, 5725 Venture Park Drive, just down the road from the site. We also have the owners here from what is Ameriprise, the Ameriprise Financial Office. There's Neil Medema and George Schmoiver, if I said that right. Never been here. So they're the owners, and the reason for the proposed addition is because they're joining forces, joining practices to bring George and his group into Neil's existing office there, hence the 4,000 square foot addition. In reviewing alternatives for this site, we looked at working alongside Bosch Architecture. They're the architect on the project, working on the addition, and we looked at different alternatives. They had recently put in the patio area behind the site plan, or behind the existing building that they would like to keep. So we're working around that, and then the grade change in the rear of the property climbs up substantially. So we wanted to keep the addition away from that as well. I think other than what Colton's presented, I would just say that we're very sensitive to the fact of how that building is laid out, not only architecturally and from a flow standpoint that they've worked with Leanne from Bosch Architecture on to create the office circulation and layout that is desired, working around the existing features. We also had to provide additional parking spaces, as you saw on the site plan, to provide for 30 parking spaces in the existing lot. So we're extending that further to the east, and then that was a result because we didn't want to put parking spaces up front. Ideally, they wanted to keep them over on the north side. As far as the buffer yard on the south side, I know that's an area of concern and should be, but in looking at a lot of that vegetation down there, it's scrappy, it's all gnarly as you saw from the pictures. So what we would like to do is do some nicer, newer plantings down there, some evergreens to help in the screening of that area to the south in the, in the winter months, to help with that, and then provide some different species in there than just the overgrown weeds and gnarly stuff. So that's a little bit to the south. The staff report was very well written as it relates to the other variances that this body, although it might not have been this board, but previous boards going back, 20 years for different setback variances. We feel that this isn't a significant ask as it relates to the office use. They're predominantly 8 to 5 most days. Most days it's like 9 till 3 maybe, but I'm just picking on them because they're right down the road, so I get to keep an eye on them. But they're 8 to 5, and it's a very quiet setting, quiet operation, unlike adjacent to the multifamily. Adjacent to that is Metro Toyota, like Holton had mentioned, and that's much closer. The parking lot's a lot closer, so that's a lot more intense use, and we feel that this is kind of compromising with putting a lot of the building behind the existing building, but then expanding out to help with the mass of the building on the front side. As far as the sidewalk is concerned, we had a hard time asking for this because we know of the walkability of the neighborhood, but if you've driven through Venture Park, there's not any sidewalks. The roads are oversized, in my opinion, but the roads are oversized, and we constantly have walkers and bikers using the roads. So the people that travel through that corridor regularly are used to that. I have a hard time justifying putting in a sidewalk when you have to come off the road, go on the sidewalk. And so I know you've granted that variance in the past with the special assessment district, so I think that would be favorable for the applicants for that variance request. That's really all I have, unless you have any questions for myself or Neil or George.
Anyone from the board have questions?
My first question would be, looking at the schematic that you provided, there is a proposed garage that doesn't seem to be part of this proposal.
The garage is part of the site plan, however, it's not part of the variance request. It's a 2-stall, we'll call it a storage barn, and that's positioned off the parking lot to provide parking and storage for the business.
Okay, but I'm not seeing any connection to the proposed addition.
Correct, that
I
would
can't
be.
really tell how far away it's gonna be from the proposed addition. Do we have any issues with that coming down the road?
As far as the separation from there, so we wanted to separate them to provide for the stormwater connection
Okay.
from the parking lot to the proposed basin. But the intent is to keep that separate from the main building.
Okay, and just sometime down the road at this point.
The
The
proposed
garage.
barn, yeah, that would be constructed at the same time.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
okay.
Any other questions from anyone on the board? Thank you.
Well, just for your information, Ron, they will return for site plan approval
For the garage.
depending on the outcome.
Yeah.
I mean, one way or another, they'll
Yeah,
come back.
They have to come back, right.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who has comments about this from the public? Seeing none, I suggest as the board, we look at these as two separate variances. So can we deliberate on variance A, please? Anybody have comments on that? Seeing none, I would ask for an motion on variance A.
As you consider that, I just remind you again, excuse me, to make sure that you state your finding of facts in support of your motion, whether it's for or against. And you have certain recommendations here that you could choose from in the report on page 17.
Did we get any comments from the people who live on Quill Run Drive in any of those duplex units concerning this project?
We did not.
No motion?
I don't care for the fact that, we already have a township ordinance, and the board put together planning for the township and everything like that to have certain setbacks for certain areas and that type of thing. However, I don't really disagree with his use of being low impact, and that southerly buffer is kind of a natural buffer. You said he wanted to update it, but there's quite a bit of buffer there, so. And I think Jim can answer that. I mean, right now it's a low impact, but if they ever sold the property and somebody else could come in there and it could be a auto repair shop at some date in that zoning classification, could it not?
I'm not sure what the zoning classification is.
It would have to return for special exception use approval to make that type of change in the building, so which may or may not be granted by the planning commission.
I guess I don't understand. This is zoned as what right now?
Commercial, local business district, if we call it that. Which there are a lot of uses in the local business district. I mean, Menards is zoned the same zoning district. So in that instance, the supplemental setback makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
But in this Venture Park area, supplemental setback is to buffer an office building that works 10 to 2, I hear, and just kidding.
Well, maybe not so
But-
much for this business, but if this
Right.
business, decides they've got to go and build even a bigger place and they sell this business, they could sell it to anybody who performs the use under the local business
Yeah, but they would
district,
have to, the change in use would still have to be approved by the township. They couldn't just sell it to an auto repair place and have the auto repair place set up shop, or any of the other more intense uses that might have an outdoor presence.
But if they do anything that's listed within the ordinance that is more high impact, Menards, mini Menards or whatever, they can do that.
Only if it's a permitted use. Something with an outdoor
If it's a permitted
storage or display area would require planning commission approval, which may or may not be granted, and then they would take a hard look at
it's
neighboring
a-
land uses.
Could this, according to the ordinance, say become a retail as opposed to an office building?
Yes, it could go to retail as a permitted use, but we would still at least look at it. And if we determined at an administrative level that it needed this board's review, we would bring it to you.
If it's a permitted use, how can we deny it?
You can't. As long as it meets the conditions that might be imposed on that particular land use.
Is this CR or?
It's just the local
Just C.
business district.
I was just looking at the uses to clarify.
I can read them. It's,
Okay.
any business for retail sale of merchandise and services, a bank, credit union, financial institution, office. laundromat or dry cleaning, except those establishments providing cleaning services for other laundromats, hotel, restaurant, indoor theater, hospital, not gonna happen, pet shop, a church, childcare center. But here are some of the special uses: a convention hall, adult care, funeral home, any business with the drive-in window, retail lumberyard, skating rink, gas station, car wash. Those are all special uses.
I guess
And
what
more,
I'm
but-
thinking of when we mentioned retail, though, is if we were to grant this variance, and somewhere down along the line, this would become retail. Retail would then at least require an upgrade or somewhat, some more parking spots. That would still be far enough away, that wouldn't affect that side of it. So I don't think that that would necessarily cause any more traffic in the area where this particular addition is. How big is that building?
And I know for the substantial justice that one of those other ones that they mentioned was, I was involved with, in that instance, there was no other alternatives for that owner to do anything else except what he intended to do. Whereas this case, we do have an alternative to go east, even though they didn't like to design it that way.
I recall the one on 8th Street, we granted that one closer to 8th Street rather than building out the back, and that was due to a neighbor trying to ask us for that because he didn't want that building next to him. So, I mean, they had an alternative, but we granted it to them.
Well, the board's in deliberation. If the chair decides to open it, he'll let you know.
I thought a question came about, so.
Well, I still have not a motion, so do you have, I have a question then. If you could step back up, please, to the mic. No, that's fine, I mean, my question would be, the way you have this set, it's kind of like in the corner. Kind of, was there a reason you didn't go straight out the east side, other than grade change?
Yeah, so if you took the same square footage and went east, you wouldn't have enough room to fit that within the setback. And couple that with the existing pergola area that they constructed a couple years ago and the proposed storage barn, you wouldn't be able to get that area in there. And like I said before, the internal layout is really the reasoning for the kind of the square circulation pattern for their offices and all of that. So if you just box it in there, then all your offices are scrunched together and you don't have the internal circulation like that they would desire.
You also mentioned that some of that foliage and greenery that is in place between this property and the multifamily home, is that all going to be removed or just
No.
portions of it?
Just a portion, just enough to get the stormwater detention basin and the building in, and then we would supplement that with, I actually have a set of plans if you want to see them, but we would supplement that with evergreens down along the south and other plantings. So we would be adding to what is out there now, even though we're removing some of the brushy, gnarly scrub brush in there.
So I'm going to repeat, I'm looking for a motion either to approve or deny, or approve with stipulations. Are there any more comments or questions from the board? At this point, I would have to say that with the lack of a motion, this has to be denied. Is that correct?
At this point, if there's not a motion to approve, we usually prefer that we have a motion to deny for the record, but if there's no motion at all, then the variance is not granted.
If you need a motion,
That's what I've been asking for.
well, I don't want to make the motion, but I will.
Okay, please.
I move that we deny this, primarily because there can be some alternative to reorienting this building, which will take away from removing that southern barrier. And Mr. Everett, to me, is right. We put together, or somebody, our predecessors put together these ordinances to provide for buffers in areas such as this. And I haven't seen any reason why we should deviate from that, based upon what we've got here in front of us. So I'm not in favor of it. I move that we deny it, the setback.
Do I have support on that?
So this is where we have to list the reasons for
Well-
denial in the motion?
Yeah, and I believe Alice sufficiently
Okay.
clarified his position, saying that there are alternatives, which in essence would say that there aren't unique circumstances, and conformance with the code is not unnecessarily burdensome, and it could be considered self-created. There are options, so I think Al's motion is adequate if there's a support.
Could I ask for a clarification?
No,
Please.
there's a motion.
Not unless the chair allows it.
I don't know, but what can you need clarification?
I would just like to ask if you guys have reviewed the other variances that were approved similar to this case.
That's out of order. You're in deliberation.
No, I mean, it has been, and we're in deliberation. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's up to us to now look at that.
Is it too late for one last comment or not?
At this point, I think it's time we have to have we have a motion on the floor. I'm looking for support.
I'll go ahead and support the motion.
Okay, we have a motion support. I'm going to call for a roll call on this particular issue. The motion is to deny the variance A. Mr. Everett?
Yes to deny it.
Mr. Smith?
Yes to deny.
Mr.
I-
Van Plank?
Yes, to deny.
Mr. Gould?
No.
And I say no. Motion is, the motion passes.
And just for the minutes, for the person who's doing the minutes, Farmer abstains.
Correct.
Put that in there to begin with. Okay, now going to variance B, the sidewalk. Can I get a motion on the sidewalk, especially if we're looking at approval with a stipulation?
I would move that we approve the variance for the sidewalk with the stipulation of the owners that they will not oppose the joining of a special assessment district if one is instituted in the future by the township for the purpose of constructing that 5-foot non-motorized pathway.
And can we incorporate the finding of facts by the staff in support of that motion?
And in support of that motion, I would ask that the findings of staff be added.
And I'm looking for support on that motion.
Support.
All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that variance is granted.
And one abstention.
And one abstention. You recused yourself earlier. Okay. Moving on now. Item number 7. This is for 6660 Rose Arbor Avenue. And this is for a variance, front yard setback for an accessory building.
Thank you. The property owner, James St. James, is requesting a variance to allow for a reduced setback of 30 feet from the west property line in order to construct a 26 by 26-foot accessory building on the property located at 6660 Rose Arbor Avenue. The minimum front yard setback along North 9th Street, which has been identified by the township as a designated highway, is 70 feet from the edge of the public right-of-way rather than the customary 30 feet. And a visual of the subject property is provided on this slide. And as mentioned before, the Michigan courts have applied 5 principles for a variance. These standards of review are provided on this slide. Over the next few slides, I'll provide a summary of each standard against this request. The first criterion to consider is unique physical circumstances. The subject property currently possesses a single-family home on a 3/4 acre corner lot. When the home was constructed originally in 2016, a condition of building permit issuance included a requirement to install a basin and leaching structure in the northeast property corner to assist with stormwater management due to the clay soils on this site. Additionally, records demonstrate that there was a signed agreement between the township and the current property owner restricting any building activity within 42 feet of the eastern property line. This is attributed to the common low area on the east side of the property, which needed to remain undisturbed and unchanged. The site is also subject to the enhanced setback provisions for properties along North 9th Street, preventing any construction of a building or structure within 70 feet of the lot's west property line. However, it should be noted that the property owner already possesses a 4-stall car garage and was aware of the above physical constraints tied to the property prior to building on it in 2016. The second criterion is whether conformance is unnecessarily burdensome. Reasonable options for compliance are available by continuing to operate the property in its present state. Use is presently being made of the property with a home and a 4-stall car garage. Denial of the variance would not prevent continuing reasonable use of the property. The applicant references in his narrative that the public right-of-way jogs inward towards the property by 17 feet, making it 50 feet between the center and the edge of the public right-of-way rather than the standard 33 feet. The 50-foot width from the center of the edge of the street right-of-way is the standard width for county primary roads when adjacent to platted subdivisions or site condominiums. The proposal of a new accessory building is not required by the zoning ordinance. And then the third criterion to consider is substantial justice. So in researching past ZBA decisions regarding setback relief for accessory buildings, planning department staff were able to identify 3 similar cases. And a summary of those findings are provided in the staff report. The next criterion to consider is whether the request is a self-created hardship. The applicant's interest to construct an accessory building is what is creating the request in front of you today. While it could be argued that the request is self-created, the corner property is encumbered with an enhanced setback from the property line along its North 9th Street frontage. A basin and leaching structure was required to be installed in the northeast corner of the property to help manage stormwater when the building permit for the home was obtained back in 2016 due to the known soil conditions impacting the lot. Also, no building activity is allowed to occur within 42 feet of the eastern property line. The last criterion to consider is whether the health, safety, and welfare of others will be impacted or not. Setbacks are a building restriction which are designed to provide a form of security for the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Building setbacks are also in place to have consistent building lines and maintain views along corridors. The stretch of North 9th Street that is adjacent to the subject property is 55 miles per hour. An enhanced setback of 70 feet is purposefully in place to protect not only the public, but property as well in the occurrence of a motor vehicle accident. That said, if the variance is granted as requested, the proposed accessory building would be about 64 feet away from edge of pavement along North 9th Street. On this slide is a summary of the findings of fact for both variance approval and denial. And last are the possible board motions. Possible board motions include: 1, the ZBA approves the variance request, and if the ZBA chooses this motion, staff requests that the condition be attached requiring the property owner to obtain a building permit through the Oshtemo Building Department. And then 2, the ZBA denies the variance request. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, yes. I was going to say that anyway, so go ahead. Ms. Farmer.
I'm not fully understanding the importance of the agreement for the east side of the property, that no activity shall occur within 42 feet of the east property line. I'm not understanding the significance of that. Is that because they're just saying that's why they're not going to build it further east? Because, like, I can't look at this picture and tell what 42 feet from the east property line is. That's why I'm trying to better understand the significance of that.
Dusty, what visual are you currently looking at?
Just the very first one where it has the dimensions, has the footage for the west side of the property, but nothing for the east. But we mentioned the east side in the staff report, so that's.
Yeah, 42 feet is basically where that eastern edge of the home
Yeah.
is, along the east property line. It was just mentioned to show that the building is unable to go on that side due to, those physical constraints back in 2016. As the agreement stated between the Public Works Director at the time and the current property owner.
Now, if I recall correctly, Dusty, our engineer was concerned because it is a very low-lying area, that you not add any additional impervious surface in that area, so nothing to be built.
From what I did a quick drive-by, there's quite a depression there. And that
Yes.
is more or less to act as a detention should that much water get into that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So in other words, there's no way in the world you can put a building in there unless it's on stilts. Well, that's sarcasm, but you get the point.
Yes.
If you want to build them like they do in Florida, you can build them.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I guess I'm looking at this picture and I'm like, well, 40, it doesn't seem like 42 feet would be, it just looks like they could scooch the building over a little
Could you put
further
up the
east.
schematic, please? This right here, that's in that 40.
Right, so
That's-
it's 42 feet from here, right? From the furthest edge of that retention pond, or retention area or whatever?
It's 42 feet from that far eastern property line.
Oh, from,
All,
So it
yes.
couldn't go in here.
right, so it could go here. Or, that's what I'm saying,
From back here, they're showing 47 feet from the north, 49 from the east, of the property line, so.
right, so then why, I'm not understanding why the building couldn't be in a different location. Still, even after we're talking about this, like directly behind the existing home.
Well, you do have the required setback as well from the north property line of
And there's not enough
of
space.
10 feet or the height of the building, whichever's greater. I believe in this case, the proposed height of the building is 21 feet. So therefore, the minimum setback from that north property line would be 21 feet as well.
And does there have to be a certain
And
amount of
then-
space between the home and the accessory building?
Yes, wall-to-wall distance of minimum of 10 feet.
Okay, I think that's the one that's not gonna be, they couldn't get that, okay.
Well, per the previous request, in the shape he wants it.
Yes.
Okay,
But you should hear from the applicant. He might have
Yes.
some of these answers for you.
May I ask a question? From the applicant themselves.
We're going to bring the applicant up.
Okay.
And again, please, can you state your name for the record?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is James St. James, and I am the homeowner. I built the home, and probably to answer the question, the area on the right, the east side of the property, after I cleared the land, and we were in the midst of getting the building permit, got everything dialed in and had my application in, and we were getting a lot of stormwater coming in, and they thought, to the neighbors and all over the land, they thought it was our property. And so it was required that we have the home moved 49 feet, almost, well, about 45 feet roughly, from the east property line. So it robbed me of, if I hadn't had to have a house moved to be here, I wouldn't be here before you today asking for a variance, because that took away about 30 feet of my property that I can't use. And as it turns out, it wasn't my property at all that was the water issue. It's actually 9th Street, the Kalamazoo County Road Commission's issue, which forced me to have in the back there, I don't know if you can see it from your diagram, there's like a retention pond. I had Balkema put it in, and they said, we have never, and I've developed subdivisions, and I've never had this happen before either, said, we have never seen this kind of system put on a private property. I said,
that's not the issue that we're talking about
no,
today.
well, the issue is there's an area behind my house I can't build on it that I'm describing. So that's why I'm bringing this up. And so that took away why I'm here today, the rights that I had to build in those areas that I no longer have. And so that's why I'm discussing that point of view of.
So my question, we brought him up here to answer my question, and that's what I was looking for. No, we literally just went through that. I had the question, Jody said we should ask the applicant. Harry
Well,
brought the applicant
I'd
up.
like to be able to tell my story if I could.
Statement, then you can ask.
And then you can ask any questions you want, but I would like to be heard on this issue, because was this a hardship created by myself, as one of the requirements is? Was this a self-inflicted? No, it was not. It was a mistake of seeing something that was there that was not, it had anything to do with my property. This really catches the water for the Kalamazoo County Road Commissioner. Up until recently, they bermed up the area in front of our property where road water was coming off the subdivision before us, down in this valley, and then from the south of us, going to one area right in our property where we got videos of rivers coming to our property. And we finally got this resolved. Yeah, I do have 4 garages, but the height of them are only 7 foot tall. And I've got a 1939 street rod I just bought, and I need, I have to have an 8-foot trailer to bring it around to car shows and stuff. And I really would like this building for that purpose. And so I also made note of some properties on West Main back to this, another thing too, it's like when this subdivision was developed, the property in front, to the north of me has a 33-foot road setback. Because they had a deacceleration lane put into under the development, they stretched it out to in front of my property, which really isn't necessary, because that area is just for deacceleration before you go into the property. So that robs that property of 17 feet of setback. And so also I was looking at some properties on West Main, not right on a highway, where there's 4 properties that I made note of near Menards, right in front of Menards, just before 8th Street, and they're 34 feet from the edge of the road to the highway. 34 feet. That's 4 properties in a row. I'm asking for 64 feet from the edge of the road of 9th Street, which as far as I'm concerned hasn't been noted as a highway yet. I heard that mentioned before. But this hardship that of this 49 feet to the east of my property that was created by a misdiagnosis, and also this retention pond that I had to build that was $7,500 back then. That'd be like $15,000 I pull out of my pocket to pay for the road commission's water runoff on my property. Now it's been resolved, but it took forever to do it. And so that took away the use of my property. And this is an opportunity for the township to make this right with my property by allowing me to have this building in this location. And that river running through a house was like a nightmare from hell. And if that would have been caught earlier, I wouldn't have had to put this in and been so highly scrutinized on building this home when I did all those years ago. And it's just, it still haunts me. But I'm not asking for a lot, I don't believe. But that's about all I have. I don't know if you folks have any questions for me or not, but I'd be glad to answer them if I could, but.
Yeah, I still have the same question. Why can't you move it further left or to the?
Because that's not allowable. It said so in my building permit that I gotta stay 49 feet off of that. So what I was told, I don't know.
49, I guess,
I
I need to
mean,
see
that
where's
49 feet
Hold
or
on, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let her ask
I
the
need to
question.
see where 49 feet is from the east property line. We don't have anything that shows us
This,
that.
It's on the
Might have
site
been
plan that I
marked
created.
up.
I don't know if you have a copy of that.
Right, so again, I'll ask the same question. Why can't you move it further east? Because I'm looking where 49.
In order to obtain the building permit, it specifies in the building permit approval that that buffer has to be there. Again, miscalculation. I don't know if it can be switched now and put it there or not, but
I still don't think you're answering my question.
can you put it right behind your house?
I can't because that's where the retention pond is.
No,
Right.
not on this diagram I'm
This
looking
is,
at.
you should have a diagram of it because it was,
I'm looking right at it.
it's right back there behind my house.
Right, so between that and where you want your proposed building, you could put it right in between there. And it would be, and you'd have plenty of room from 9th Street.
Show me where you're thinking about.
Right there,
Right in here?
right behind your house.
Right behind here?
Right there.
I got 47 feet. I gotta be 25 feet from the property line. The building's 26 wide.
21 feet from the property line because that's the height of the building. We just did that, right?
21 plus the building leaves 26, will be touching the house, and it's gotta have a buffer between the house and that.
What is the buffer between the house?
10 feet then.
See, I'm having a hard time differentiating between the truth that's happening here and things that are just being said. No. We're not doing a private study session.
All right, then, go ahead.
What, wait, I'm sorry?
There's no basis for that.
For moving the building?
No, for the comments you made about differentiating.
Oh, what's truth and not? We were just told that the decision by Oshtemo Township to put the retention in was a mistake. I don't think that that's the truth that
You
has
can
been
contact
shared.
the county road commissioner.
I don't know that that's what's been shared with us. So some of the truths of the situation, I think, it's a little gray here. But again, the question was, why can't it go right behind the house? From our viewpoint, can it go right behind the house? Because if we can't, then that's the answer to the question.
I think I heard Mr. Hudson say you couldn't do that because it wouldn't lead the way this is currently laid out.
There's not setback or space between the houses.
Yes.
It would be right against the house, doesn't
The-
it?
Then that's the
the
answer.
answer.
That's what I'm asking. Why can't it go?
'Cause it
I
would-
asked that before he
it would
even
be
came
touching
up.
That's what I was trying to show you.
Again, no private study sessions. We can do it as a group, but that was my question. So there was something about the shape of it that was in here. Is that not an issue?
That would have been my question.
Okay.
Is there a reason you can't change the shape of this building to fit it back in behind it? And I think, truthfully, in looking at it, it may be difficult, but I'm going to ask you if you could.
we got 21 feet from the back line, the building's 26, that would be 47 feet, and that's about the distance between the back of my property. There would be no way to change the shape, and it's still given a buffer between the building requested to be built and the house itself, the existing home.
If you've resolved the water issue with the road commission, does that area even get water anymore? And could we not just revisit with the Public Works Department that area being restricted?
It would be a lot to dig that out. I mean, that's like a drain field.
It's the size of a commercial.
Yeah.
According to Mr. Balkema, he says it's something you would see in a commercial residence when they installed that. But at the time, we didn't realize where all the water was coming from. It was coming off 9th Street and the division straight across from us. It was
Yeah.
coming right in.
There's like
I
a
have
dip in
videos.
front of our property.
And just be,
In the
real quick,
road.
I don't want to interrupt you, other than
Yes.
just, could you state your name?
Yes,
so
I'm
we
sorry.
have,
My
for the
name's
record.
Brenda Bryan.
Okay.
I'm also,
This is my wife.
Okay,
spouse
thank you.
here.
That's the
I'm
only reason I
sorry.
wanted to stop you, so we had it for the
so
record.
where the large basin is, part of that was Mr. Elliott at the time. And
That's
there was his guidelines of where the house had to be positioned at the time because of the basin that they wanted to put in at the time. Again, not knowing where all this water was coming from, it was thought that it was rushing off our property. Our house has been flooded 3 times. We've had to empty out our basement 3 times to clean and gut mold and everything else. That's beside the point, but the reason why that basin is there was to contain all the water, which was thought originally, or the origin was our property. In hindsight, it's not. And only recently has it been rectified by the County Road Commission that they have restructured some of the drain field coming off of, what's the name of that road, Sky something, or North Star, whatever that housing division is directly across from us. They rerouted that, and then they regraded the opposite side of the road on 9th Street to accommodate for the water, because it's been bad. I mean, Chuck's been flooded too, Chuck is here. But that's the whole purpose, where this house is positioned was based on in 2016, where all that water was coming from. There was concern, this huge reservoir was put in. That moved our house. So now we're looking at the backside, Dusty, and I think that helps answer your questions. There's not enough room between the house and the property line to put the building in. You can't use the east side because this huge basin to contain water is in there. So that leaves this other little corner where he is trying to work with. So he's, instead of the 70 feet, and then he talks about the acceleration, which is right before us where Ted and Joan is at. There's a deceleration lane right there. That should end there, but that is also my understanding. It continues down 9th Street a little bit
No, just
further.
in front of our property.
In front of our property.
And in front of his property, it stops.
Okay.
He's our neighbor to the north, and it
So-
stops there, it goes to 30 feet instead of 50.
So bottom line is, this seems to be the only functional corner, and that's where he's looking to put this building, because the restrictions to the east, the width in the back, and it leaves this corner. I hope that helps answer your question.
Oh, it does, definitely.
Okay.
That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
That's pretty much all I have. If you have any other questions, I'll be glad to answer those, or...
I've got a question, is that you're saying that that's going to be a building for car and trailer. I don't see any description or any notes of any driveway. How do you access it?
Well, I won't be in and out of there on a regular basis. I just needed to store it in there for the winter time, and then, and also to be able to putz around with it.
Well, when you do take it to car shows, how are you gonna get it in and out of your property?
I'd have to, I can go down my grass in my yard and along 9th Street I have a decent amount of area there.
Any other
Well,
comments?
my question's similar to what's being asked in regards to the access. Now, for maybe a point of clarification, County Road Commission fixed the runoff by regrading, am I understanding correctly?
They built like a berm along our property, and they said they still might, and they also did a great change on the development just to the north of us. There's a road up there. They did some stuff with that. And then the neighbor to the west of us across the street, what he had done, he's flattened his land out. It took away this little swell that went to a retention pond. And so they made him restore that. And so that's been restored. And they said that, we'll see how this works. And so far it has worked. But if they had to, they would raise the road a little bit to take the dip out right in front of our property. But, so that's kind of where it's at with that.
Those changes just happened, so we're still seeing how that
Yeah,
all
last
fares.
September.
So the County Road Commission put a berm up, which we did like 3 years ago, and they had us take it down because we were flooding, and now they put it back in to help us because it was flooding, and it's a shame that last flood probably wouldn't have happened if the berm was there, but
Okay. Well,
they went ahead and put the berm in, and that seems to have helped. The neighbor had to return the swell to catch their water runoff off their property, and then they did some regrading on 9th, as well as the storm grates that are, what's the name? Star, help me with that. What's the name of the road?
North Star.
North
North
Star
Star.
West.
They did some reconstruction with how the water runs into the grates there. And between the neighbor restoring the swell, they and the County Road Commission putting a berm up across our land to catch the water so it doesn't run into us, and what they did with the grates, all of those combinations thus far to date seems to be working, and this is all recent, so, we're still kind of looking into the future, and hopefully that will be resolved, but it seems to be taking care of it thus far.
Okay. The part of my other question was involving the retaining walls that are in that corner of the property after it was backfilled last year, kind of the berm.
Yeah, I built those.
How does that impact the access to this proposed building?
Impact what access?
Well, I guess maybe what I think I'm hearing you say is that you're telling me you're gonna come in and off of 9th Street to get to the building.
No, along my property. I can back it up on my property, and I don't need to come out 9th Street.
Okay, but you also, after
Those don't go all the way across.
They don't go all the way across. There's a
so
good,
there is enough width.
Yeah, there's
between
like-
9th Street and your property to kind of
Yes.
come in from behind through the trees and
Yes.
still get into the building you're proposing,
up closer to the road, right, yeah.
okay?
Are there any other questions from the board? Any questions or any comments from, please, step up and state your name.
Yeah, I have three perhaps. I'm sorry, I didn't know there were going to be so many people.
Step to the mic, please.
My name is Chuck Hess. I live on 3000 North 9th Street, the property just north of them. I printed out some pictures to kind of help illuminate this situation. I don't know who would like them.
Please bring them here. We can
Okay.
let the board look at those.
We'll take one for the two of us.
We can share that.
Excellent. Now we really are going to have a private study group right here.
Okay, I'll walk you through the pictures. First of all, these are our neighbors. I don't want to have any ill will. I don't want to have any problems. I looked at what they were proposing to do and tried, just as you have, to figure out a way to make this work without issues. But the situation has been, and I'll just give you, things that have occurred, no commentary on it, well, truthful commentary on it. When they bought that property, I was surprised anybody bought that property, because along that west wall is about a 9-foot dip off the grade of the road. And one of the first things James asked me when he was doing construction, do you have any problems with water? And I don't really. At 3,000, it runs down the driveway, runs in the yard. But that whole side of their property, 9th Street comes from a hill, goes down a grade right to their property. So as snow melts, as it rains, water is going to fall on that property. And it was very lush when it was all woods. So, I understand it's an issue. It stinks that they've had those problems, but when they bought the property, he's a builder, he should have known that difference in grade and the way the road works, that there would be problems with water. Now, the first thing that occurred, there's been a number of issues that have occurred, and I'm only sharing some of these with you to show that there's been some problems working with St. James. The first one is, he tried to build a number of berms along 9th Street to prevent the water from going in his yard. And every time a big rain would come or snow would melt, it washed away a portion of that wall. So, and then the water would go in his yard. He's exactly right. It turned into a little pond. But one of the last things he did is, in the first picture on the first page, is he built what I'll call a driveway or a runoff. He built it off 9th Street, filled it with gravel, and ran it into my yard. It actually went 15 or 20 feet into my yard. And as you stand and look at it, it was apparent that one of two things was occurring, is that, number one, he runs a construction business, lists that at his current property as Castle Rock, I think, improvements. He parks trailers, sometimes on my property, sometimes not. But as I looked at that driveway, the angle in which it came to my property, it was pretty clear to me that the intent was to let the runoff water head to my property to redirect it. I had a major problem with that because my driveway couldn't take the additional water that would have come down that. So I think I talked to Mr. Everett when this occurred and said, what can we do here? This is not a good situation. And he informed me that what they did was actually not legal or against code, whatever it was. That remains there, except the berm was built and the berm did take care of the water. It appears to have, at least. If you flip to the next page, this is an example of when he parked an RV in the backyard, partially on my property and partially on his. Before that, he had parked a construction trailer completely on my property, which I asked him to move, and he finally did. Actually, go back to the first picture, too. There's an important thing here. If you look beyond the white trailer, you'll see a red dump truck. That red dump truck he used to help construct that, what I'll call a driveway, and he let that sit there up against the road for 3 months. The challenge of that was, yeah.
I don't see it down.
That's what, I don't think we do either.
We don't have a.
Yeah, it's hard to see. I can point it out on there if you like.
Which picture is it that you are referring to?
How many different pictures? Maybe that would help them, 'cause
Page, the one that shows
I don't know if I got the first page, the last page, or updated.
They all came at different intervals.
Yeah.
I don't see a red dump truck.
You don't have that picture.
Okay, good. I'm not going blind.
I think they have two copies of it over here. Yeah. The
This
dump
one you're
truck's
talking
sitting right here.
Oh, I see. Okay, you want to pass that down to them? It's,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah, look beyond that trailer, there's a little red spot.
And the situation with that is 9th Street, it comes from a hill, so I have limited view distance as I turn left on a 9th Street, or right for that matter, at my driveway. The dump truck was completely blocking my view of the left-hand side. And again, it stayed there for over 2 months. I had to call the police, actually, to try to get it to move. It finally moved, I think, a week later after I called them. But that's going to go to what I'm talking about later. So if we go to this picture of the RV, that's what I'm talking about. He stored construction equipment in the backyard, miscellaneous trash.
May I ask what this has to do with this variance?
I'll get to it. So it shows that he doesn't have a lot of respect for the property line or my property at all. If you go to the next picture, and this is the picture I'm talking about, the picture of the driveway. That demonstrates, and I had to have a surveyor come back out to stake out and make sure the existing stakes that showed the property line were correct. Because I had enough problems, I had a couple of options. Option number one was take legal action, which is really expensive and messy and wouldn't solve it ongoing, or install a fence to keep him from putting anything on my property. And if you look at the picture with the pink flag at the bottom, it shows again that he installed that driveway into my property. And again, storing miscellaneous trailers on his property. This picture demonstrates it again. Now, this picture also demonstrates the difference between the road grade and where the bottom of the property sits, and it's the same for his property. So it shows a pretty substantial, I think it's about 10 feet, difference from the road down to the property bottom. Now, my house is on top of a hill, which is how I avoid any water problems, although I've had to replace my driveway twice.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right here. Can you get to a point that why you wish to either
Yeah,
want us to deny this or accept it?
This- Yeah.
What you're saying right now sounds like something that has to be dealt with in other channels. We're here to deal with just the zoning issue.
sure, understand. So this, if he's asking for a 30-foot setback, yeah, I hadn't seen the schematic of where he planned to put the building. The building would sit fairly close to 9th Street. And again, he has the history of storing construction equipment on his property, so I believe honestly that's what he intends to put in there.
Okay.
And,
Again, I'm going to have to see, if that's the case,
yeah,
and if we look at the actual request for the variance, we approve it, and as you say, he's going to store things illegally, then that's something that we can't deal with. That goes through the township ordinance officer.
no, I understand. But if he creates a building close to the property of 9th Street and parks things in front of it, again, it'll block my view of 9th Street. And now that it's 55 instead of, I think it was 45 before, then that becomes a substantial risk of me pulling out of my driveway.
I totally understand that. But again, this is not something that the zoning board of appeals can deal with. We have to deal with the issue of the property and the issue of the building.
Sure, I understand that, but the impact of approving this will impact me negatively, potentially. And that's my case.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody here have a question?
I have a question for staff. Is that a concern that the view would be blocked for other drivers to the north? I mean, because I'm looking at this map and I feel like it would not block the view at all, but,
Not if it's 30 feet from the right-of-way line.
right.
It's 64 feet off the edge of the road.
If it's truly 64 feet off the edge of the road, then I don't have a concern, as long as it doesn't park vehicles in front of it.
And again, if that's the case, and they're blocking the view, then that's an issue that isn't for this body.
Sure.
Okay? And I can sympathize with you, and honestly, I pull out of my subdivision every day onto 8th Street, and there's a low-hanging branch on one side and a big bush on another. I totally understand what you're saying, but that's not an issue for the ZBA.
Understand.
I will say I have
Mr. Chairman, I'm going
Yeah.
to ask that you curtail it
Yes.
and bring it into board deliberations,
And we are in now time for our board to deliberate.
unless you want to ask other, or the board wants to ask questions.
I've already
you
asked
need
that is there any other questions? And now we're into deliberation. Board, questions, comments, concerns? at this point, I'm looking for a motion. Can I make a motion? That's true.
Yes. We don't have any prohibition against that.
Seeing none, I move that we grant this variance based on the fact that we have a unique situation with the lot. I'm now looking for support.
I'll support that.
We have a motion and we have support. And again, I will be looking for
Can we include in that, Harry, the staff's determinations of fact in support of the variance approval as well?
well, that, yes, I think I did with the unique situation in the lot,
Right.
okay? And include the staff recommendations. I'm calling for a vote. Mr. Everett?
Approve.
Aye. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Van Plank?
Yes.
Mr. Gould?
Aye.
Mr. Jackham, yes. Thank you. Moving on now to number 8. Any updates or other business?
Your July meeting will be canceled. I didn't announce it earlier because I wasn't sure if anything would get tabled today, but we don't have any items. so.
I have 2 other meetings that day. I'm glad of that. Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Okay.
See you in
Is
August.
that it? Anything else on the other business? Thank you. You're welcome. That'll take us to number 9, adjournment. All those in favor?
Before you do that,
Yes.
let me ask this question. Because of the property, the request that came up from these folks on Venture Boulevard, I drive by that area every day, and I'm concerned that there's a horrible disrespect between the Kalamazoo County Road Commission and the folks that live in the Quail Run area. But it goes beyond Quail Run, because they came in and cut down some big trees on both sides of the road. And it's a danger to people walking in that side. The street may be wide, but I can tell you, driving down that every day, when people are walking or when people are riding bicycles, skipping whatever they want to do, there is not enough room, because all of that crud, that junk, the tree branches, the debris has not been removed.
We are adjourned, yes.
Fred, you can thank the Michigan State Legislature. They are only responsible for the traveled portion of the road.
I cannot believe that. The
That's the
same way
law.
with the storm drains right across
Yeah.
from my house. It's the same way, and they're telling, folks here are telling those people that complain about it, the property owner is responsible for it. Like,